chairs the facilities committee as well. I wanted to point out your fellow Woodbridge residents and neighbors tonight who are also members of the building committee. We have Lynn Piazzik, who also chairs our Board of Education, Donovan Lofters, who is our Board of Finance representative on the building committee, Teresa Ramia, who is our education representative on the committee, Marty Halpern, and Justin Rem, very valuable members of our committee as well. As you've gone through the tour, and as you heard from our administration this evening, there are several issues at Beecher, several challenges, space challenges, that we're trying to mitigate with the project that we have, that we're working on. Back in late 2021, early 2022, your Board of Education realized that there were some space concerns at Beecher. They formed an ad hoc committee which looked at some of those challenges, looked at what other schools around the state were doing to mitigate those challenges, and made some recommendations to your Board of Education and Board of Selectmen to follow through with this process. The process of an education specification study to find out what we needed, and a feasibility study to look at our building and look holistically at it to see what could be done to make those educational spaces. So that's why we are here tonight. We're here to begin the process of putting those studies together and looking to see how we can make appropriate educational spaces for the students that we have right now, and how we can prepare for our increasing enrollment in the coming years. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to our two firms that are managing this for us and doing the work, Antonazi and Associates at Construction Solutions Group. And they have a wonderful presentation and workshop prepared for you, and I hope to have a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. First, sound check. We have a few more people than we had last time. So I have told the team that we're going to use a microphone tonight. Of course, you know, that's a little different. Usually we like to yell and scream, but this time we're going to use a microphone. So hopefully you can hear me okay and not like eat the microphone. My name is Mike Ailes. I'm the principal of the Antonazi Associates. We were the architectural firm that was brought on to provide this feasibility study. Before I go into the team and we go into the presentation, there were a few things I wrote down, kind of like ground rules, I guess, just so you all know how this is going to work tonight. The first thing is, this is a community workshop. So what you are not going to see tonight are designs. You're like, oh my gosh, you're an architect, you should be providing a design tonight, right? We need to get input from a lot of different sources, and this is the second of two community workshops that we are seeking input from the community. You will see some design thoughts, you will see some concerns, some constraints, some opportunities tonight, but you're not going to see any designs where we're saying this is a new option and this is a renovation option. That is coming down the line. There's a number of different factors, as I said, we need to go through before we get to that point. We've had some cases where, not here, but in other studies, that there are questions that come up throughout the entire process. What we're going to ask is that there will be a portion after the exercise we do that we will ask for any questions, but we're hoping that we're going to answer a lot of the questions you may have as we go through the presentation. So we've been in the position before where questions start getting asked like 5 minutes in, and it's like, well, that's coming up on a slide in about 2 minutes. So if you could hold your questions until then, and then if you have burning questions, we could certainly ask after the first activity. You will see index cards that everybody received. We want to get information from all of you in a lot of different ways. So first there was a Q&A, which was great that we were able to do that, right after the tour and have some Q&A. We're going to have small groups. We're going to have a bag exercise. There are also index cards. So we want to collect information from a lot of different methods so that whether you feel strongly about standing up in front of a group and asking your question, or writing it on an index card and putting it, giving it to us or putting it at the front, we want to get it in all different ways. And finally, the money. Unfortunately, not good outside this room. But the money is for the bag exercise. And we'll explain that in a little bit. So if you're wondering about that, if anybody doesn't have any, just let us know. We'll ask anybody, if they need some. But there's a few empty seats up here so you can steal some. So with that being said, a little bit about the design team that you see this evening. So I'm going to just go right down the line. So for the Antonazzi Associates team, Michael Sasso was a principal in charge. He was unable to make it tonight. I'm basically filling in for him. He's the lead, he would be the lead designer on the project, or lead principal in charge of design. As you are going to hear, Lisa is also very much involved in the design. She's going to be the senior project manager, Lisa Yates. And she will be speaking to you a little bit more about design itself and about this project. My role is mostly on the communication side as a principal with the firm. And so that's my job tonight, I guess, as facilitator, moderator, and also communicator for the district when we're going through the whole referendum aspect with the community. And Patty McKeon, some of you already know Patty. She is a Woodbridge resident, and she is our interior design director, and will be involved in also speaking regarding programming, space programming, ed specs, and ultimately would be the interior designer involved in the project down the road. As far as consultants, we have a special owners consultant. That's Construction Solutions Group. Educational specifications were part of what we are supposed to provide, and we have been doing that. In fact, those ed specs, as we call them, are pretty much at a point of just need final draft and then review and approval from the Board of Education. You'll hear more about that in a bit. Our consultant team is made up of several consultants we've used over a period of years that we are very, very comfortable with regarding school projects. Consulting Engineering Services will be doing our MEPFP, that's Mechanical, Electrical, Plumbing, Fire Protection, Technology and Security Consulting. Michael Horton Associates, Structural Engineering, would be involved in that aspect. Pan American Consulting Services is our professional cost estimator. I don't need to tell you probably that the professional cost estimating of a project like this is incredibly important. What the cost of the project is going to be, bottom line, what you're probably going to want to know besides what are we going to get out of it. And then finally, Stantec Consulting Services will be doing our site civil engineering. About our firm, I'm not going to read the bullets, I'm just going to sit and talk to you. We've been involved in educational design for nearly 70 years. We have worked with the state on numerous projects from study all the way to construction completion, somewhere in the range of probably close to 300 projects over all those years. We're working on numerous studies now. One of them is Beecher Road. We're working on numerous projects around the state. So we are very familiar with the state of Connecticut. You will hear that later on, not just from ourselves, but from Jim Giuliano from CSG, who's also the owner's project manager. We have combined a lot of information and a lot of experience with the state regarding reimbursement. Maria stole some of the thunder, which is perfectly fine. I'm glad you did, because I could go through these slides a lot quicker. So, how we got here. There is a history and there is a timeline that came about to get us to where we are today. Again, as was mentioned, in fall of 2022, the Woodbridge Board of Selectmen established basically this particular committee that is looking at all of this. Their first meeting is September 30th. There is a charge there. I'm not going to read the charge, but it has a lot of different aspects that were not just study. There were a lot of improvements and a lot of facility issues that needed to be addressed immediately, and so those were part of the charge. There were current members and the committee advisors that you all see there. Most of them are all in the room tonight. There were additional charges that were all listed here. Again, they had a very finite charge and mission on this particular project. Ultimately, what it came down to is the ad hoc enrollment and instructional needs and space planning committee, which Maria alluded to. There was an enrollment report that was commissioned in 2022 and updated in 23, and it showed that growth that Maria talked to, and actually the superintendent, about growth of the school over a period of time. As you'll also hear, that the enrollment out 8 years is what's important. That's what the state identifies for state standards. So a growth in the school population over 8 years, not just year to year, but over 8 years, that is what the state looks at for reimbursement. And so that was incredibly important, because not just state reimbursement was going to be more, but there was going to be more needs programmatically, which needed to be addressed in educational specifications and in the school itself. That charge of the ad hoc committee was a bit different, which was review and address the physical, administrative, and instructional implications of increasing enrollment. There were working groups from that ad hoc committee that looked at a lot of different issues regarding space needs, enrollment, shared services, with your surrounding neighborhoods and districts, and expansion of the school and several other factors. And at that point, the recommendations were issued to continue discussions with the districts in the area regarding shared services, which is important in, by the way, almost every district, and you hear that about shared resources in every district, try to be more efficient and save money, ultimately, for taxpayers. And then hire a consultant to develop a feasibility study and the educational specifications. That would be to look at repurposing the existing space, evaluate other town spaces for educational instruction, and evaluate space utilization, instructional needs, and options to address those needs. At that point, Construction Solutions Group was hired as the owner's project manager in January of 2024, so just over a year ago. And then an RFP went out for conceptual design and estimating services, which is where there were interviews of the architectural teams, and we were selected in June. So that's the brief history, and now here we are. So what is our process? One of the most important things that you probably want to know is, well, where are we and when's this going to get done? Well, here's the schedule. And this schedule right now is showing basically starting from July, when the kickoff meeting was, there's a process of, and again, we'll talk through each of these over a period of time. There were, over a period of time, existing facilities assessment, just as scanning all the existing drawings of the school, doing site visits, modeling the building in software that will allow us to study the building better. This is usually done in a software called Revit. Most of you don't know what that is, but that's okay, but it's basically 3D modeling software. So we use that to ultimately model the building, and then obtain consultant input as well from all those consultants I mentioned before. The programming and educational specification development was happening in November, December, and January. It is showing the end of January. The ed specs are pretty much, I think it's fair to say, in the 90% completion, probably even in the high 90s. It really just takes the Board of Education to do a final review and approve those. But during the process of educational specification and programming, we're also working with, as the architect, and our consultant team working with the educational specification consultant to make sure the programming of the spaces and square footages and mostly the quantity of the spaces are addressed in the needs of the school when you're looking at this level and this conceptual level. Educational specifications really tell you how to do everything you need to do in the school for the design, all the way through the end when the school has got the ribbon cutting. So the ed specs are very prescriptive in terms of what's needed in the school, but we have to know what the space program is. Are we providing 600 square feet, 800 square feet, 1,500 square feet of different types of spaces? So we need to accommodate that. So you'll see ultimately that we are here. So we are at the second of the two workshops. We are in the process right now of starting the conceptual options development and reviewing those. We are at the very early stages. It really is going to come into the month of February into March where we're really working on conceptual options. It may go even a little past that, and there might be some overlap as well with the cost estimating. And at that point, we work together with the cost estimator with those options to look at the cost estimates of those options, and then provide a review selection period that would be somewhere in this area after the cost estimate. There are two tri-board meetings one is scheduled next week. That is with the Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, and Board of Finance. Again, I believe that is a public meeting, but that tri-board meeting is really just to explain where we are and provide an update. So that is happening, I believe it's on February 12th, next Wednesday. And then there will be another tri-board meeting that will happen sometime after the conceptual options were reviewed and looked at and selected as possible options to then move forward to a grant application. What's important for me to know is that the goal is to get a grant application in for the state of Connecticut for reimbursement by June 30th. That is the deadline every year. Whether there is a referendum, you'll see this big note up here. Whether there's a referendum before or after, there will be a referendum to vote on this. But the issue is that we need to have, or the district needs to have a grant application in by June 30th, as long as you have a referendum date set after that application submission date, then it is fine to have the referendum after. But they need to know that you are serious about the project, that you're not just sending in an application for state money and saying, okay, yeah, this is what we'd like to do, but at the same time, you have to commit to it. But that commitment can come as late as, literally as late as Election Day, November of 2025. So I just want to let you know that, because some feel that, oh, well, we have to have a referendum before that application is sent in. You do not, but you would need to have at least a date that's set. So ultimately, that date of June 30th is really what our target date is and what we're shooting for. The study process, as I already mentioned, really took about 2 months, maybe 2.5 months, and it was collecting all the data we possibly can regarding the school. Whether it's the enrollment studies, whether it's facilities information, existing drawings, utility bills, whatever it takes with our consultants, we collect all that information, and that's where we're disseminating all of that. Ultimately, these are all the items that we are required to assess. I'm not going to go through that list, obviously, but there is a lot of assessment that needs to go on in a school like this. You can't just hope that you're addressing all of the comments or all the issues that need to be. Existing drawings aren't necessarily all that accurate sometimes. As-built, which are famously called, are usually not as-built. They were supposed to be built that way, but they weren't. And we find that out later on. So this is why we're assessing all of these different aspects, which will then feed into the actual educational specifications and the design or conceptual design of the project. With that, I'm going to be quiet for a second so I can get my voice back a little bit. And Patty, I'll change the subject.
Okay, so, exactly.
No.
So the ed specs, how we developed them, it was a really fun exercise. We spent a whole day here, and what we did is we reached out to all the stakeholders of the school, and that meant the principals, the superintendent, the staff, the facilities, the support staff, anybody that uses the building on a daily basis. We sat with them, we interviewed them, we heard them, we listened, we asked questions, and we take all this data and we come up with square foot per space. We hear the needs, and we try to pull from them what isn't working, not just what you're living with and how you're making it work, but what it could be. So these meetings took place, as I said, we spent the whole day. It was great. This staff is so passionate, and it's so exciting and motivating to hear the passion. Everybody loves their jobs. They want to educate the kids. So all of that information is put together in an ed spec, which is a document that we use as the basis to launch the design. So you can turn to the next slide. And in the design process, we are all striving to create 21st century learning environments. Most of you know what that term means, but just to talk about it briefly, as it's stated there, it's a holistic approach. The environment that the kids come and learn in is the most important part of making the curriculum work. So we call it the third teacher. The first teacher is the parent or caretaker. The second teacher is the classroom teacher. But the third teacher is the space the teacher is trying to conduct the lesson in. And if that doesn't work, you're going to fall short. You have to create and strive for an authentic learning environment, which is all about flexibility. There used to be a time when students went into a classroom, they sat in a desk, and it was stagnant. You faced front and you listened to the teacher teach you the lesson. If you moved, that was considered you were doing something wrong. There's tons of white paper data to support that movement is good. No two students learn the same way, and the world is catching up to that. So now your space has to. So we call it like the 4 C's. Curriculum is about collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and communication. So the classroom needs to evolve for all of those activities to take place. So the next slide is just showing you a sneak peek of what those spaces might look like. All these different learning models. The first one is a real, authentic, active learning, flexible space. The one in the middle is called a learning lab, where you have technology in 4 corners, not just in the front of the room. And then the one on the right is more of a presentation space or seminar space for some of the older class. Just examples. Next slide is showing how the active and agile learning has to be handled by a second grader. It can't just be up to the teacher or facilities to come in and rearrange the class for that day. Furniture is designed so lightweight and flexible and flipping and nesting and stacking to to create these spaces in a pinch. 3 times a day, young students can reconfigure their spaces. And we're not picking furniture yet. This is just a study, but we have to think about these things when we're determining the way the room is going to be. The size, the location, the adjacencies, and to make sure it's going to be big enough to accommodate all these features. And then the last thing I want to mention is that I am a well-accredited professional, and WELL is a very important movement in the whole country. And basically it's to create the best, healthiest indoor environment for any built environment, which in this case is a school. So it's all of these concepts, a lot of them are engineering driven, but they also relate to design, and so we integrate them. So if this becomes a project someday on some level, and the schools should decide that they want to get this certification, I would be able to facilitate that for you. And the next is going to go back over to Lisa.
Hi everybody, I'm going to tip this a little. So this is Connecticut High Performances, which is sort of the corollary to WELL. Connecticut High Performance is required for all state projects over a certain amount of money, which we will definitely be over. It's 5 or 10 million, depending on what kind of project. It's similar to, if anybody's familiar with LEED, it's similar to LEED Silver. We've also found that over time, the code has caught up to LEED Silver, but to a greater extent to the Connecticut High Performance mandate. So we still go through all of these items. It's a great checklist to make sure that we're making sustainable choices, which we try to expand upon also. The other thing that we really think about when we're doing design, which I'm going to get into in a minute, we think about how to construct in an occupied school, because schools can't close, especially schools as large as this one. So you have to think about it. And you think about it, it's never too early to start thinking about it. Our cost estimator will need it to price the project. You know, in the first phase, you know, which wings are emptying out, where are the kids swinging, and how can we minimize the number of moves that each child makes, and how can we minimize the need for portable classrooms and education elsewhere. So we're going to talk a little bit specifically about Beecher School, the existing conditions. Going to take us through some design options that, you know, it's not, we are designing, we're not sharing that yet. But we're going to go through the options that the committee asked us to investigate and sort of explain where we are with each of them and what that means. First of all, we're looking at the building itself, and you just took a tour of the building, and we see this juxtaposition of all of these crowded spaces where there's overlap, storage issues, and then there are also large spaces with almost nothing inside. The rotunda, which is this space here, there are some potential safety concerns, but there's some glass fronting the hallway. Also, it's an interior space, but we're in our study, we're looking at these kinds of spaces because you need all of your space to work for this to be a successful project. So, also looking at your building is just under 150,000 square feet. If you take the pool out of the equation, it's a little bit smaller, it's more like 134,000. But also, if we look at, you know, the various eras, it started as this sort of beige was in 1960, and ever since then you can see it's been added on to the biggest. This was the next one in 1970, and I think in 1997 they took a little piece off and they put more on. And the other thing that I don't have a great graphic up here tonight, but because I didn't share it with the last group, but this building it acts like a one-story building. There are at least 16 different levels in this building. So when you're looking at how do I make these spaces more efficient, how do I make them work, especially if your veto and facility is trying to help for next year, it's not easy. You have to really look at everything holistically and take stock of where you are vertically as well as horizontally. So to look at this also, we're looking at the pool as being separated from the educational space. Not only because that's something that's desirable to the school district, but also when we look at reimbursement, the state is not going to pay for the community pool as part of the school. So when we look at your total, which is 147,000, that's how many existing square feet you have. We pull out the pool, we have this 134,000 square feet. We're going to get into a deep dive of how we got to this next number, the 130,000, but it's based on 1,039 students, which is your maximum number of students in the projection. And then we're also looking at your reimbursement rate. So for renovation, we're looking at 32%. So this is the existing floor plan. It's really here for reference. You can pull it up later if you need it. But one thing, and we'll pull this out more when I go through the various schemes. We have very small, or they're not even very small, but we have small classrooms. If you think an ideal classroom size is in the neighborhood of 850 square feet, we have classrooms that are down to 715 square feet. We also have classrooms that are 1,400 square feet. That doesn't mean you could put 2 classes in there. So, you're still restrained by the, the configuration of the school. And these are slides from when we were first looking at this project. And we were, we keep hearing that there are space issues, and there are. But is the school too small? The state doesn't think the school is too small. The state thinks you should have 4,000 square feet fewer than you have now. But at the same time, we realize that you have space issues. It's just how do we organize this and make it more efficient? And some of our options stay within the existing building envelope, and some of them solve the problem in a more dramatic way. So our earliest options, those are the ones we're working on now, are sort of the most conservative in a way, because we're looking at the existing school as a straight renovation, and we're looking at it through classroom sizes. So we were asked to look at smaller class sizes and larger class sizes, and the 1,400 is you could fit more than 24 kids in there. That does not mean it's a good idea. And one of the things that we started looking at are your larger spaces, and how do you tie your larger spaces together, and how can we also create more right-size spaces. So you need a lot of typical classroom spaces, but now, we heard reference to more special education spaces. Those tend to be more in, say, the 500 square foot range, and you need more of them. And they have to be dispersed throughout the building in a way that works for the kids and works for the teachers, so people are, hopefully get across the entire campus to get to their resource classroom. So another way that we're going to look at another series of design options that we'll look at, the charge was to look at additions. And I don't think it's so simple as an addition that will make the school larger. But if we could look at the least efficient parts of the school, or the parts where we could really solve a problem by removing building and replacing it with new, we will. So we looked at, you could put an addition out in clear, in a field, and that's actually, it's nice from a phasing point of view, because you build that first, you move the kids in, then you move down through the wings and build it that way. We're also looking at something in the middle. This is the area of the most grade change in the school. So it's an opportunity to introduce another level. So instead of I think if we save some of this building, you're always going to have a couple of ramps, but maybe we could, eliminate more than half of them. That would be a worthy goal. And then this series of C options, I think this was born out of looking at other towns, maybe Orange. Is it possible to move the kindergarten and pre-K wing somewhere else in town? And we'll sort of leave this one open, but developing the options as we are now, your kindergarten and pre-K needs are also increasing. So this orange area that we drew out for what's here existing is actually needs to be a little bit bigger than it is. And then the D option is, well, what if we just find a new site and build another school somewhere else? And when this came up, a question that we were asking, so over 1,000 kids is very large for an elementary school. There are a couple in the state that are this size. I think Highland and Cheshire is one of them, or a few other ones. But, you know, you saw the long distances that you have to walk. So we're sort of looking at, could there be an option, like with maybe some existing, it doesn't really matter, but that functionally separates the school so you still feel, we got a lot of feedback that you love having one school. So could we make that work organizationally so that just because you love being in one school doesn't mean that your first graders are going from one end to the other every day before lunch? That brings us to the first community exercise.
So the one thing that I didn't mention at the very beginning is that we do want to be fairly respectful of your time. So when we go through all of this, if there's more time at the end, we will certainly have quite a bit of Q&A. So I think that's also the goal. We're running actually pretty much ahead of schedule, so this is really good. So what we'll do, I'm going to explain this community exercise. We'll do the exercise. I'm going to then show the results of what happened in community workshop number 1 with this exercise. And then I think what we'll do is we'll kind of open it up to a little bit of Q&A just for this particular section of what we've reviewed, because then we're going to be going through the state process and the reimbursement process, which is also quite important when we're going through the study process. So that being said, how many people have heard of the iron triangle? Okay. Sometimes, at least there's one. There's usually at least one. But the iron triangle is actually a very simple, I guess you could say, philosophy, where you're talking about, or the other way of looking at this is the 3 legs of the stool, right? If one leg falls, then there's another one that's going to compensate, right? Or the whole thing falls down. So the whole idea with us in this particular exercise of a feasibility study is there's the low cost, the done quickly, and the high quality. And there's a lot of belief that, well, you know, you can't really do that. Well, you can. I mean, the goal is to get right there. So you can imagine the challenge of hitting that target, because there are certain issues that come into play when you're trying to do all 3 at the same time. So what low cost in a project like this, and again, this is just when you're thinking about the bag exercise, this is kind of what we're going through right now. So now we're going to put you through our pain point a little bit. So low cost, and on the lower left. So low cost would be executing the project at the lowest cost we possibly can to taxpayers. So of course, that's something that we're very cognizant of. Of course, we want to provide the least cost option. But of course, to do that, you have to look at, well, what's the quality? You don't want something that's low quality. So if it's high quality, what you want is something that's a school that's utilizing high quality, long-lasting materials. Another thing that came up at workshop number 1 was, well, I'll save it for the next, the list. I'll save that. That goes to the high quality. Done quickly is completing the project ahead of schedule. We want this project built by summer of 2026. All right, well, I can tell you right now that's not going to happen, but 27, 28, 29, I mean, there are certain issues that could come into play in the project schedule. So how quickly it's done, how much high quality it is, the high quality of it, and how costly it is, all factors. So if you try to do, so the issues with low cost versus done quickly, the project may appear cheaper, and it may require higher repair and replacement costs than expected, right? So you're doing it quickly, but you're doing it at low cost, so you're not getting the quality. On the flip side, fast and good equals high cost. So the cost of the project may be higher than expected if you're doing it very quickly, which is expedited, which is a cost, and you're doing a really high quality project. So that might be way more than you expected to spend on a project, so that's an issue. And then finally, low cost and high quality equal low priority. So you're doing it at the lowest cost that you can, at a high quality, but the project completion may take a lot longer than expected. So you're getting what you want in the quality end, but you're doing it at a low cost, but that means you're not doing it, you're spreading out the schedule. Because, and of course, we could talk about escalation and other factors which would actually counter that, but we're not going to do that tonight. We're just kind of giving you a scenario of all the things that we're looking at. So, what is this exercise? Why do you have money in front of you? So, you all have Beecher bucks. And the idea behind this exercise is that there are 13 different categories that you may put your money into. You have $1,000. But the one issue is that you may not spend any more than $200 in any one bag. So you can't load a bag, not allowed. Can't do that. Or you can't put $900 in one and $100 in another. So you have to spread it out. I gotta make sure, I gotta put this down because I don't want to go to the next slide. Because that's the result. So as you're looking at this, you'll see that there's all these different items, okay? And they're all factors that we're looking at as we go through this process. I'll just very briefly go through them so you can all see them. They're all in the bags. These are in no particular order. This is not priority and trust when I tell you the results are not in this order either. I made sure of that, all right? So security of the entrance and perimeter. That's a very common one in the community, making sure the perimeter and the entrances are secure. In today's day and age, it's not really even a question. That's something that usually is forethought. Maximizing the grant reimbursement is in blue. That's because that's that cost issue. So if we're trying to maximize the reimbursement and trying to do something that's a little bit lower cost, there might be some issues that come up with that. So it's just, we don't want to necessarily go to maximize the state reimbursement and do whatever you can to make it low cost. Well, then you might be countering the other items in the quality and the time. Site circulation and traffic flow on the site, another common issue on a lot of school projects. Improving indoor air quality, that's probably the only one that appears on every single study that we ever do because improving indoor air quality is important in a lot of our schools that are older. Mitigating impact of construction phasing, you'll see that's in that red color. That is that whole timing issue. So, you know, if you're doing it quickly, one of the ways to do it quickly is actually, and I'm not suggesting anything, but build a new school, move all the kids from an existing school, move them in, and tear down the existing school. That's the quickest way to do it. 18 months, 24 months, okay, boom, you're done. Phasing could take 36 to 48 months. I'm not saying that it would on this, but that's the kind of thing that we're thinking about when you're talking about phasing, and Lisa was talking about construction phasing. That's a cost that's also added to a project because you're mobilizing and you're moving kids around, so you're trying to mitigate that. Unified arts and STEM spaces are very common again in a lot of elementary schools now, not just high schools. Now they're moving down, middle schools, elementary schools. More secure common spaces, that's a little bit more for this particular project. The rotunda, the cafeteria, the gym, the self-assembly, making them more secure and actually in some ways not repurposing them, but making them more programmatically efficient. The specialized instruction programs, it's usually the resource rooms, intervention spaces, and gifted learning. Those are things that we didn't talk about 20, 25 years ago. And now we're talking about them all the time. They have to be implemented in schools. The new 21st century classrooms, we made one mistake last time. So we didn't have outdoor learning. Outdoor learning is also a very important aspect of new 21st century classrooms. So to go to there was a question about what is the perfect classroom? Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be an outdoor learning classroom, but a new 21st century classroom includes a lot of different aspects that Patty talked about, but it also doesn't have to be limited to an indoor space. It could be in a courtyard, it could be in an amphitheater, it could be a little area that's got seating. So that's something that also is part of that. Sustainable design, energy efficient, and net zero. Net zero was added from the last workshop. That issue goes to the quality. That's the comment that I said I would save for the list. So to do net zero can be very costly. To do geothermal, not so much PV, but to do a lot of different sustainable design aspects could be costly. Someone brought up, well, why do we have to stay at LEED Silver? Why do we have to meet the high performance? Why can't we go beyond it? Oh, we can go beyond it. Don't you worry, we can go beyond it. But at what cost to do a net zero or a net zero ready building? Which is another, maybe it's not net zero, we could do net zero ready, meaning everything in the infrastructure is ready to go, and then you implement these systems later on down the road, but everything is ready to take on a net zero capacity or function. And then reducing and eliminating interior ramps and floor levels, you've heard that a few times tonight. Shared gathering space for the entire school, which seems to be limited as well. And then renovation of the pool for the community. Again, we had to add this in. We were kind of thinking, do we put it in, do we not put it in? We put it in because it is definitely a concern, and it is definitely something that this community wants to know about. It's been already asked as a question. What are we going to do with the pool? Well, we don't know yet, but right now the way we're looking at it is it's renovation of the pool for the community. That would probably be a separate project, but we would look at the cost of that and how it would be implemented, but not as part of the school program. So that is the way we're looking at it right now, because it is not eligible for reimbursement, and we really need to focus on the students and not on the community pool. So it is a question, and so we put it as a bag, just to make sure it was fair that we had the pool in there, because someone was going to say, where's the pool bag? So we did it. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break, or whatever it takes for you to get up, put money in the bags, and come back, and then we'll start. We'll do a little Q&A, just to kind of see if anybody has any questions of what we've done, and then we'll go to kind of our part 2, which is a lot shorter. The next slide is the results from workshop number 1, but not that one. We're going back. So we're obviously going to take all of this and add it to this particular workshop. But the number one answer, or number one, I guess, feedback in terms of participants, what they wanted to see is new 21st century classrooms, outdoor learning. Number 2 was sustainable design, energy efficient at 0. Number 3 at the top, security at entrances and perimeter. And number 4, specialized instruction programs, resource rooms, intervention spaces, gifted learning. So. And then it became, after the top 4, I think there were 3 that were tied at 5. That was Unified Art STEM, shared gathering space, and the pool came in at tied for 5th. So when we did the results and we did the numbers, we stopped at 4 rather than have 3 number 5s. So that's how the workshop, the first one, that's how the results hand out. And we'll see how tonight, how the bags add to that. So, before we go, just again being respectful of time, we're actually doing very good on time. We expect to get you out of here at 8. That's the goal. Before we go into cost estimates and the grant reimbursement process, it's a much shorter length, but maybe a little bit more complicated. So, are there any questions up to now that what we presented? I know there were a couple people that came up and had questions that we were able to answer during the bag exercise. Is there anything that anybody has for questions before we proceed? It's okay. It's okay if there's not. There'll be time at the end. So, okay. So now the complex slides, I'm going to leave the Lisa in there. There you go.
Now, before I hand it over to Jim, I'm going to do a slightly deeper dive into how we got to the size of the building. So, yeah, maybe I'll stand next to the mic. That would be good, right? Okay. So we're looking at our 1,039 students, which is the highest number in the next 8 years based on enrollment projections. And then you take, there's a chart, and you pick the population of the school. And the state allows a particular number of square feet per child per grade. You take these numbers, you add them all up. I added this one twice. Then you divide it by 7, which is the number of grades served by the school. This gives you the average area per pupil that the state will reimburse for. which gives us a total area of 130,023 square feet. And just to refresh us, the school with the pool is almost 150,000 square feet, which is why, it's so important to think about when we talk about space. According to the state, you have too much space, it's just not performing for you in the way we want it to do. It's a you have a mothball community pool. So if we take that out, when we look at the rest of Beecher School, we're about 4,000 square feet over. And there's a chance that we could be issued what they call a space standard waiver for that. Jim could talk about it in greater depth, but it's fairly likely because the state's not unreasonable. They're not going to make you randomly tear down 4,000 square feet of an existing school. But if we look at different options, they might be stricter, like if we're tearing down some of the school anyway.
Thank you. I'm Jim Giuliano from Construction Solutions Group. I'll just go over briefly, this is where everybody glosses over. I'll go over briefly the different types of reimbursement, the different types of grants that this project could be going for. The first is a renovation status, which means the entire facility is brought up to what they call a 20-year standard. So that means the exercise that Antonazi is going through right now, if we are going for renovation status, they have to identify that every component of this building, the walls, the windows, the steel structure, does meet a 20-year standard, so that means it lasts for another 20 years after the renovation of the project. Typically, it's a lower square foot cost because we're not digging for foundations, we're not putting in, pouring concrete for foundations, we're not erecting a steel structure, and we're not erecting exterior skin because it's already here. The next one is an extension and alteration, and what that means is if we were going to do an addition and maybe some specified alterations or renovations to the existing building, but not the whole building. That gets a little tricky sometimes with renovation because the only time you get reimbursed for an alteration would be if it's a programmatic change. If you're going to refresh a classroom, if you're going to go in there and just make a classroom, then you don't get reimbursed for that. They look at it as maintenance and repair. So you have to be careful if we're going to go in that direction. The next one is new construction. Obviously, that's building a brand new building. The state will look at that and say, well, it costs us less if we do a renovate as new. Whoops. Excuse me. If we do a renovate as new, so they try to discourage you from doing a brand new building. Now, the difference with that is that on the next slide? The difference with that, actually, I think it's on the next one. Yeah. I'm going to go to this one because I'm talking about it, and then I'll hop back. But if you're building new building, if you can demonstrate that a brand new building will cost less than a renovation or renovate as new, then you can get the higher reimbursement rate. I'm not sure if I've not been on a project where that was the case. I'm not sure if Antonazi was.
Yes,
you have? Okay.
twice.
Oh, really?
Once in another one in process.
Okay. So it's not common, but you can take advantage of that should the project you find the project to be less expensive as a new building. Our goal is always to maximize state reimbursement. We look at, again, trying to make sure that we're utilizing the space to its optimal level. We also look at minimizing, and Antonazi is very good at doing this. I've worked with them on a number of projects. They understand this process and they understand the reimbursement rate very well. And we work well together in maximizing the eligibility for the districts that we work with. Some non-eligible off-site work, and what that means is if we're going to do a utility connection, within the boundaries of the property, the state will reimburse you for that. But as soon as you go over that property line, just tying into the street, that portion from, it could be 10 feet, 20 feet, they will not reimburse for that. Repair, replacement, maintenance work, again, as I stated before, if you have an alteration project, you really have to look at, are we changing the programmatic use of that space? Because if we're not, then it's considered to be a repair, replacement, or maintenance work. Window replacements, and again, athletic facility lighting, parking turf feasibility study, movable site furnishings. Limited eligible outdoor athletic fields, swimming pools and auditoriums. I know we talked a little bit about that. The state is taking a much harder stance on reimbursing pools because they're looking at it as it's a community use and we're paying for the community use of that pool, so they really take a hard stance on that. Retractable gym seating and some new replacement seating areas in an auditorium. Again, I went over this about the new school. If it costs less than a renovation, then you can get that higher reimbursement rate. A couple of things that we're going to have to go through for the grant application are resolutions. We have 2 for the Board of Selectmen, and then we're going to need 1 from the Board of Ed. So the Board of Selectmen are going to have to adopt a resolution that authorizes the Board of Education to apply to the Commissioner of OGA or DAS to accept or reject a grant. And that's one thing that's important. Even though you submit a grant application, when you get, or if you get approved, you get a grant commitment letter, and it says you can either accept this or reject it. Obviously, I've never seen anybody reject one because that's the whole purpose of going for the grant. And then the Beecher Road School Infrastructure Upgrade Building Committee is hereby established as the building committee for the project. And then that the Board of Select Persons hereby authorizes at least the preparation of schematic drawings and outline specifications, which is would be part of this study. And we're on exercise 2.
Exercise 2. I told you that was going to be short, but a little bit more complicated. Okay, so community exercise number 2. What we are going to do, this is another way of obtaining information from all of you, is breaking out into subgroups. We're not going to do anything like count off or do anything like that. What we'd like to do, Lisa, Patty, Jim, I'd like you for tonight, because we have more people to facilitate the discussion, and I'll go to one as well. Gravitate to where the closest, sheet is, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, and ultimately, we've got the rules of engagement up here, but with this crowd, I don't think we have to worry about that, so I won't read them. We're going to have the 4 of us just lead the discussion, facilitate based on 3 questions that we just want to obtain input from you. What are the positive aspects of Beecher Road School and the facility? We've also had in the past, it's not just facility, if you want to talk about the culture, you want to talk about the teachers, you may do that, because that also actually feeds in to a lot of what we're doing. So please don't feel it's only facility, but that would be part of the focus. What are the challenges posed at the current facility, and what top items that maybe hasn't been mentioned, what would you like to see addressed in the project? Maybe it's considered a little bit more blue sky thinking, but ultimately, We just want to get your input on those particular questions. With that, maybe groups of, from what I'm seeing, 4 or 5, just gravitate, like, you know, if you guys want to come over to 1 and over here to 2, and then just kind of go to, and all we want to do is go through maybe, I think we could probably do it in 10 minutes, just very quickly, just go through those 3 questions. So I don't even know what numbers everyone has, but we're going to go through real quick. Each of us will just go over what the positive comments were, the challenges, and what the top items were that may or may not have been addressed that people wanted to see. We'll just start with Jim, go to Lisa, to my sloppy handwriting, and Patty. Jim.
All right, so the positives that we talked about, I want to say the biggest one was grade separation, having the younger kids separated from the older kids, the 6th graders away from the 1st graders. They really like that. The playground, and actually, surprisingly, the different levels. Okay. They like the garden area and the outdoor classrooms, the recreation options, and the display of the artwork throughout the school. Some of the challenges, the space, the sprawl, the kindergarten bathroom setup, and that kind of goes into top priorities as well. And then what I thought was good was the maintenance. You have, as we saw earlier in the presentation, you have different additions built at different times, which has different equipment, and does make it difficult for maintaining the project because you have all these different components. Some of the top items, the pool, technology in classrooms, bathrooms in classrooms. They wanted to go up to grade 3. I kind of talked them into, usually we only see it from pre-K to 1. After grade 1, we typically don't see bathrooms in the classrooms. Class consistency. Again, you know, having a classroom that's 1,400 square feet and then having another one that's maybe 750 square feet. So making the classrooms consistent across the board so that way they could be interchangeable. And the other one was phasing of the construction activities. So, Lisa.
Okay. So our group appreciated dichotomy. There are lots of things that are crossing the line between positives and challenges, but definitely only a positive. Teachers that love and the community loves the kids, and there's a real sense of family here. The MAG program, community and the PTO, again, these are just the nice feeling of the school. And then we get into, it's really nice to be able to access the building from the trails that are around the school, but at the same time, that translates into having to look more carefully at site security. Extended daycare is a really nice option. It's in that crazy space. So secure classrooms, we have to have secure classrooms right now, but the kids are getting locked out of the classroom, so how do we deal with that? What kind of hardware do we look at? Also, the school is spread out. The elevation changes, feels like a labyrinth. Pre-K through 6th grade is a really large spread for a large school. Preschoolers with 6th graders. The empty rotunda is a challenge. Right, so just thinking about ideas, what happens if we split off kindergarten and or the 6th grade to bring that down? Preschool is a really important thing. Full day preschool, more capacity than you have now. The idea of the modular furniture was really well received, in part because it's cool to watch the kids actually be able to move the furniture around themselves and contribute to their own day. This was tied to the ramps. We went zip line.
I haven't seen all the rest of them, but that one wins. There's always one that wins a night. So.
Could we make the space into villages to make the school feel more intimate, even it's large. Gym spaces are too far away, can they be centralized? Bike access is more of a town issue, but what can we do to bikes when they come on site? Same with pedestrians on Beecher, I guess it's difficult.
Interesting. Yeah, we have some similar off-site comments too. Positives. The programming in the school itself, super inclusive. The school offers something for all the students. So it's very diverse in terms of the programming. The one school, whole town idea, just having everyone on one campus, having the kindergarten separate. Great school community. We already knew that, but we're going to put that down anyway. Outdoor campus spaces. Just the ability to have outdoor campus spaces is definitely an advantage here that a lot of communities don't. And it's a large school with a lot of students, and so it was a closer community. The kids know each other. They build relationships over a period of time where they're not jumping from school to school to school to school. So for 7 years, they get to know each other really, really well. And they know each other's brothers and sisters, and it's very close-knit. So that was considered a positive. Challenges, ramps and entrances, just the ADA access, whether you're in a wheelchair or got crutches or whatever it is, the ADA access is very, very challenging. Here, wayfinding, getting lost in the school, even if you've been here a few times. Points of access and security, of course, is a concern, but then just making sure there's a number of cameras and other surveillance. They need to work hand in hand, both the camera and the technology and the physical access. Dedicated special programming, specialized program spaces, dedicated for areas like music, of course, which was mentioned. Odd-shaped learning spaces. Some of the classrooms are very quirky, and they're different sizes, which was already mentioned. And off-site traffic near the school. So I think that kind of goes to this where it's not so much on the property, but off the property. There's a lot of issues with walking and driving and people not stopping at stop signs. And I mean, I don't know how you necessarily affect that off-site, but then that becomes an issue. Well, is the site so challenging here that you move the school site? I'm just saying that that's something that goes into, well, maybe just the site's in a bad place in town. But that's just, again, comment goes into the challenges. And then I just wrote, if there was one thing, the cafeteria wasn't really mentioned, I don't think yet too much, but the limited size and making sure that it's increased. This is also actually a fairly common comment that comes up about the waves, the number of students when they're eating. If you have 4 or 5 waves, which is of course ridiculous, the kids are eating much earlier and much later. So trying to do something where programmatically the cafeteria is larger, or at least keeping the size of it in mind. Better, larger assembly space. There really isn't one now that's really going to be able to encompass the whole school. I don't know if that's necessarily a space standard issue. I mean, usually they say, well, half of the school population. That being said, I don't know if you could fit 500 kids in one space here. So that alone is going to be an issue. And then more specialized classroom spaces and learning areas. And dedicating, where they're not, OT is sharing with, another space, where they need to be really separate and dedicated.
Okay. So I'm last, it's almost 8 o'clock, and a lot of these things are commonalities, repeats, so
You
I'll
always
say
get
real
to go.
quick.
You always seem to go last, Patty.
Yeah, I know. We have to
Sorry.
that. So the positives, the sense of community. It's a connected space. It's the only space in town where everybody is going to the same building because the houses are spread apart. It's a town where there isn't a lot of spaces for the whole community to come. They have common experiences because of that. The staff is awesome. The culture is exceptional. It's very progressive, forward-thinking. The MAD program is a great bonus. It's spacious. There's a lot of space here. And the outdoor spaces. Challenges, some of the smaller classrooms for the younger students with that type of curriculum can be challenging. The lunch waves are large, noisy, overwhelming for some students. Sorry, I'm blocking you. The distance to the specials is challenging. With the traffic flow, students are passing each other in these long corridors, and that's not so good. The aging infrastructure, the security issues, the inefficient sizes of the classrooms, some big, some small. The potential housing growth that is being considered for the town, to incorporate that into planning. too large of a population for an elementary school. It's just the largest one in the state, and it's very large. And that can affect the administration inefficiencies because you need two of some things. That's not efficient. So new ideas, the multi-level, don't be afraid to go up. There was, that was in favor. It would have, the result would be less circulation and more efficient. A new site for a new school, just throwing it out there. The new school on this campus, remove what we've got and build something on site. Take the 6th grade out of the elementary and move it to the middle school. Was that a consideration? Separating pre-K through 3rd and 4th through 6th, 2 separate schools on the same campus, or possibly pulling out central office and relocating them if it would be a better use of the space.
Great. So, with that, thank you everyone. We have concluded 5 minutes after 8, which is not bad. We've seen it go much later before, so I think that's a tribute to all of you to, keep it moving. And I think we got some really good comments. We've had 2 workshops, and we will be collecting and collating and putting this all together. And I'm sure working with the BIUs, BC, which it took me a while to get that right and say all those initials in the right order. We will be posting and making sure this is all getting up on the website, so it's accessible, so you can all see it, so it can be communicated. That is really going to be one step, and the next step is really taking this information and going into conceptual design options that we have been kind of broaching and starting to look at. But now we've got input, and it's from EdSpecs, the community, administration, and from the building committee. So we are moving forward, going to move forward very quickly. I would only say, lastly, that if there's anything that didn't come out tonight that you want to write them on an index card or whatever, just take the index card, write something on it that you want to make sure is addressed or put in our notes. Just bring it right up to the table here, and we'll make sure it gets incorporated. Other than that, on behalf of the building committee, I can't really thank you enough. The turnout tonight was, much better, and I think there was good, really good notice. And please tell your colleagues. That's what I say all the time. Colleagues, your neighbors, your community, to stay engaged, because we will be, moving forward and trying to get these conceptual ideas together to move to a grant application in the future and to your vote. So, thank you everybody for coming out and spending time with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.